What's up, you guys? Stoopzz back again with another video. And this week I've been getting a lot of questions about Battle for Azeroth, and I'm going to try and just make a couple of videos this week trying to answer some of these questions because I do get them almost every single time I stream. And a lot of these questions do pertain to stuff like, Stoopzz, what class do I pick? I'm playing with 3 different friends. He's playing a priest, he's playing a warrior. Or what race should I pick? Should I go Alliance? Should I go Horde? Should I go Dark Iron Dwarf? Are people going to re-roll Alliance or Horde going into the next expansion? So I'm going to try and answer all these questions this week, and today we're going to be discussing which race or which faction will be better for PvP going into Battle for Azeroth. And I am a little worried about the comment section of this video because I know some people are so diehard Horde and some people are so diehard Alliance. For me, I love both factions. I enjoy playing on both factions. I like playing what is best. I like playing the race that I think or the faction that I think is best for my class. However, they're both great in their own ways. I love Alliance cities. I do love Thunderbluff for Horde. Orgrimmar is not really what it used to be, but Thunderbluff has a lot of memories for me. Growing up, I love that city. But that is not to say that Alliance does not have some great benefits when it comes to racial. So I'll discuss all of that in this video. I'll try to be as unbiased as possible. So do the same in the comment section below and let me know what race you're going to be rolling in Battle for Azeroth. So in Legion, most players predominantly that did PvP played on Horde. And the reasoning behind that was the Orc racial known as Hardiness, and then Arcane Torrent for Blood Elves. However, that was recently nerfed, and it is no longer an AoE silence, but rather an AoE purge that doesn't have much value when compared to the previous silence. So at first glance, it does seem like after the Blood Elf nerf that Horde lost a lot of value when it comes to their racials. However, they do still have the Orc racial, which is known as Hardiness. And Hardiness is simply a passive buff that reduces the duration of stun effects by an additional 20%. So this meaning if you're in a duel or you're in an arena match and you're stunned multiple times, all of those stuns will be 20% less in duration when compared to, let's say you're a human per se, that stun is going to be a full duration stun. So you get a lot of value out of a passive buff. This passive is still one of the strongest racials in the game by far because you get so much value out of it when compared to other classes, or I should say other races that have active racials, ones that you have to use and they have like a 2-minute cooldown, or sometimes they share a cooldown with your trinket, your gladiators or honorable medallion. If you activate your racial, then it puts a 60-second timer on your honorable medallion. So keep that in mind. That is why Hardiness for orcs is still for sure the best racial on Horde by far. Now, if you can't play an orc and you want to be on Horde and you want to find the next best racial, you do have a few other options. When we look at the character creation screen for Horde, there are other options other than orcs that are still viable because sometimes, like I said earlier, you cannot roll an orc priest or you cannot roll an orc paladin. So what other races do you opt for if you still want to play Horde? When it comes to priests on Horde, Undead is still going to be one of your best options due to the racial known as Will of the Forsaken. It's still a great racial that does share CDs similar to the other active abilities on your honorable medallion. However, it will break you out of any fear, charm, or sleep effects that is still useful versus various classes in the game, and the meta does shift in PvP. So some metas, when I say a meta, that being like the common groups of classes that you fight within the arena season, sometimes the meta shifts and there's a lot of warlocks, so then Will of the Forsaken becomes very valuable. Sometimes a lot of hunters and they have sleep effects, things like that. Succubus pets. Undead is always good in those meta games, so being an undead priest is not a bad option. And when it comes to paladins, we used to have Blood Elf, right? Blood Elf used to be probably one of the more go-to races for Horde paladins. However, after the Arcane Torrent nerf, I don't see Blood Elves being really viable almost at all when it comes to PvP. There's just so many better racials. So if you want to pick a paladin, you can opt for Taurens. Taurens have War Stomp, which is a great handy cooldown that does do a nice little mini stun effect around you, and you can use it to stop very important casts. You can use it to secure kills. You can use it to set up CC. It is still a very good racial. And we also have access now to High Mountain Taurens. High Mountain Taurens cannot be paladins, but they can be druids. And I would say for Horde, High Mountain Taurens have the best druid racials. For Horde druids, High Mountain Taurens have that nice wild charge effect known as Bull Rush. And Bull Rush is honestly like an advanced version of War Stomp. It's a 2-minute cooldown with a nice little charge distance. It charges forward and it knocks all enemies down that you hit for 1.5 seconds. So it's a mobile war stomp on a 2-minute cooldown. And the nice thing about Bull Rush is it does not share a CD with your trinket, your honorable medallion, which is great for PvP in arena. So for me, War Stomp and Bull Rush are like the second best options next to like the Orc Racial, and then we also have Undead. However, outside of that, just take my word for it, there isn't that many great Horde Racials other than High Mountain Tauren, regular Tauren, we have Undead, and the best being Orc. But outside of that, you're looking at Alliance if you can't play or do not want to play any of these races. Now, I know some people watch this video are probably thinking, Stoopzz, just let people play what they want. Don't make videos like this. If they want to play Alliance, play Alliance. If they want to play Horde, play Horde. I'm just trying to give you guys the best information out there when it comes to races. You don't have to watch this video. You don't have to listen to this video. This video is designed for those people that do want an advantage, that do want to make sure they roll the right race for their class, and they are looking to excel in PvP. But when it comes to creating a character on Alliance, you do have a lot of great options, whereas before I felt like Horde had almost all of the better options, and then Alliance just had humans. Now, humans are still very good, however, they did receive a recent nerf. Now, humans have had in the past one of the most powerful racials in the game, and this racial is known as every man for himself. This racial used to define the meta for arena for years, to the point where everyone would play Alliance if they wanted to do well inside of WoW Arena. Now, this racial in BFA has seen a change, and it's not what it used to be, but it's still a viable option. And the way it works is it's a 3-minute cooldown, and it removes all stun effects on your character. However, this effect shares a 90-second cooldown with similar effects, which I believe is a misprint. I think it's only a minute. I think it only shares a 1-minute cooldown with your honorable medallion. It states 90 seconds here. However, in PvP, I believe it is a 60-second cooldown. So this means if you activate your racial, you can no longer use your trinket for 60 seconds following that. So if you were to get kidney shot and then you activated your every man for himself and then you got polymorphed, you wouldn't be able to use your honorable medallion for 60 seconds. 90 seconds was a very big nerf, as it states on the tooltip. However, it being 60 seconds instead of 90, that's still a nerf, obviously, but it's not the biggest deal in the world. You can still use or roll human, and I think some players will still opt to roll human, as a lot of the Alliance active racials do share cooldown with your honorable medallion. So if this stays at 60 seconds and it's not a bug, and they revert the change from 90-second shared CD with your trinket, your honorable medallion, to a 60-second cooldown, I can still see human being quite good. But at 90 seconds, that is quite the nerf. However, there are a lot of other options on Alliance that are still definitely viable and are extremely powerful when compared to some of the Horde options. We have the new Dark Iron Dwarf on Alliance, and when I saw this racial, I thought it was one of the more powerful racials in the game when compared to almost any Horde racial. And this Dark Iron Dwarf racial is called Fireblood, and it's almost a better version of the previous Dwarf racial. It removes all poison, disease, curse, magic, and bleed effects, and increases your primary stat, me being a warrior at the moment, that being strength, by a certain number, and an additional number for each effect removed, and it lasts 8 seconds. So it will cleanse all dots, all poisons, all bleeds, whatever. If you're fighting an assassination rogue, you'll be free from all of the bleeds, and then you'll get an additional primary stat based on how many of those bleeds you removed, and it lasts 8 seconds. So this is a very powerful racial for healers, for DPS. It doesn't matter. It can buff your intellect, it can buff your agility, it can buff whatever you need, and it's a good defensive and offensive tool. But it does share a 1-minute cooldown with your Gladiator's Medallion. So if you activate Fireblood, which again is on a 2-minute cooldown, it will put your trinket on a 1-minute cooldown. So you have to time it correctly. You want to make sure that if you activate Fireblood, you're not going to get caught in a stun immediately after. However, it's still a great racial. It looks cool. Dark Iron Dwarfs look very cool. I've always been a big fan of Dwarves and their armor layout and just how it looks on the characters. And it's still a very powerful racial when compared to the nerfed human racial. So I highly recommend Dark Iron Dwarf if you are trying to get into Battle for Azeroth PvP. But outside of Dark Iron Dwarf, Alliance still have so many other great racials that are amazing for PvP. Shadow Meld on Night Elf has low-key been one of the best ratios for PvP. Essentially, it is a feint death. So for example, if an enemy is running at you and you know he's going to use a Hammer of Justice, or they're casting like a Full Moon or a Chaos Bolt or a Glacial Spike, the second that ability goes off, if you activate your Shadow Meld ability, you will completely ignore that effect. It'll act like it hit nothing. They can try and stun you and you Shadow Meld at the right time. The stun doesn't go off, but the ability has been used. If, for example, you Shadow Meld the Full Moon, you take 0 damage. If you Shadow Meld the Glacial Spike from a Frost Mage, they're one shot, you take 0 damage. So it's a really good defensive ability, and it's great for Resto Druids on Alliance. We also have the Draenei for Alliance, which a lot of enhanced shamans were taking advantage of. Their heal effect. This ability is known as Gift of the Naru, and it's on a 3-minute cooldown. However, it does not share a cooldown with your trinket. Now, a lot of enhancement shamans were taking advantage of this ability. Even some resto shamans were taking advantage of this ability. But Gift of the Naru is great for like enhanced shamans. We saw a lot of players using this, as enhanced shamans are typically responsible for staying alive. They have a role of kiting a lot when their healer is getting CC'd. They're usually the focus of a lot of the enemy team's damage. And Gift of the Naru, even though it's a 3-minute cooldown, it heals a target for 20% of the caster's total health over 5 seconds. So it is a nice ability to sustain damage, try and stay alive, and once again, it does not share a cooldown with your Honorables medallion, so that is also a great pick. We also have the Lightforged Draenei for Alliance, which is the new allied race for that faction. And instead of having a heal like the regular Draenei, they have a damaging effect. I don't see this one being super effective. Similar to Nightborn for Horde, they have like another damaging effect. I'm not saying it's useless. It does do a decent amount of damage. However, I see abilities or ratios always being better when they're used defensively, or if they have a defensive and offensive use or mechanic. And because of Lightforged Draenei's ratio only being more offensive than defensive, I'd see it being quite weak when compared to the others. Now, the last race I want to talk about today is the Void Elf. And yes, I know I didn't mention the Panda. Pandas are actually quite good. They have a very cheeky in-cap ratio, a CC ratio that could be used in battle for Azeroth. But for me personally, I don't see it being that amazing, and on top of that, I just hate how pandas look. But that is just my opinion, so don't hate me for it. But Void Elves have some of the greatest ratios when compared to other classes, and they look quite cool. They do not only have an amazing active ratio, which I'll get to in a second, but they also have pretty good passives. They have a racial passive that makes it so that their casts are not delayed when taking damage. If you try and cast a spell, there is no delay on that cast. Additionally, they have their Spatial Rift, which I'll get to in a second. And then they also have Entropic Embrace, which increases their damage by 5% for 12 seconds after dealing a damage. So it's a nice little passive damage buff that you can proc, and I think it has a 60-second internal cooldown. So it's a nice just damage buff. You have potential to do extra damage on some of your abilities. But the most important ratio here, which will be great for mages, it's going to be great for discipline priests, it's going to be great for shadow priests, it's great for a lot of classes. It shoots out this Spatial Rift that does not share a cooldown with your Gladiator's Medallion, which is also very nice. It's on a 3-minute cooldown, and it shoots out this rift 30 yards in front of you that you can activate again to teleport to that location. So I'll show you. You shoot out this rift, and you can run the opposite direction, and then activate it again, and it teleports you across the map. You can do this on X or ZY axis maps like Blade's Edge, so you can shoot it up the bridge, or shoot it down the bridge, or you can jump off the bridge, and then teleport back up. You can shoot it across the map, run the other direction, and then teleport there. You can also shoot this out and then teleport and then fear your enemies if you're a priest. So there's a lot of good uses for this cooldown, and I see it being quite good for a lot of classes. So after going through all of those races, you're probably wondering, Stoopzz, which faction should I go? To be honest, I still feel like Orc Racial is one of the best racials in the game. Although it cannot be stacked with Relentless anymore, it's still a passive 20% stun resist. And when I think about racials, or I think about almost anything in PvP, it's all about value. And you will get the most value out of a passive that reduces the duration of stuns by 20%. However, this is not to say that you have to play an Orc. If you can't play an Orc and you want to play Horde, we already talked about this. There's a lot of great options there. You have the High Mountain Tauren, you have the regular Tauren, and then you also have Undead. So there's still some great options on Horde. However, when compared to Alliance, there's a lot of options. You have Night Elf, you have regular Draenei, you have Human, you have Panda, both on Horde and Alliance. I have to just throw that in there. You have Dark Iron Dwarf, you have Lightforged Draenei, and then you also have Void Elf. So there's a lot of options on Alliance, but I still feel like Orcs have the best overall value ratio, and I see a lot of players staying with Horde. So I think right now, if I were you, I wouldn't faction change just yet. If you're new to the game, all of the races that I listed are great viable options. Again, for me personally, if I can play an Orc, I'm going to. If I want to play a Druid on Horde, then I'll probably end up playing like High Mountain. And it's also important to keep in mind that if you can't play an Orc, but a lot of players are going to be Orcs, because Orcs can be Shamans, Mages, Warlocks, Monks, DKs, Warriors, Hunters, so many of the classes within the current meta, then it might be wiser for you to be on Horde as well, because a lot of players are going to be playing Orcs, which means you might have a lot more, queues for arenas, even mythics, things like that, especially at the beginning of an expansion. But at the end of the day, you guys, these are just my thoughts on the current races in the game. You do not have to listen to what I'm saying here. It's just based on my experiences playing this game for so long, my arena experience, my PvP experience. If you are any of the races that I named in this video, I would just stick with it for now. And if you see a lot of people shifting to go Horde for Orcs, or if you see a lot of people shifting to go to Alliance for like Dark Iron Dwarf, or Human ends up still being very powerful, then I would say faction change then. But for now, stick with what you have. A lot of the races are really good, especially after the Blood Elf nerf and the Human nerf. They're kind of balancing it out a little bit, and I really like that part of the game. But if you are new to the game, I still personally think that Orcs have the best ratio by far. And then all the other ratios that I mentioned in this video are still quite good. So it's up to you and your decision based on where your friends are playing, what faction you enjoy the most, what quest lines you want to explore. It's all up to you, but this is just my opinion, and I wanted to share that with you guys. That's gonna be for this video, you guys. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, be sure to give the video a thumbs up. If you have any more questions on my thoughts on these races, you can leave those in the comment section below, and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. Try to miss me on my Twitch live stream where I answer all of your guys' questions in depth. Do not forget to subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time.